Nafisat lived a quiet, peaceful life in Aba, Nigeria. She was the kind of woman who found joy in simple things: sunny mornings, long walks to the market, and cooking her favorite jollof rice while humming old songs. She didn't wear heavy makeup or chase attention. She believed in love, kindness, and staying true to herself. People in the neighborhood admired her calm spirit and gentle smile, but to her fiancé, Kweku, none of that seemed to matter. Kweku was the opposite of Nafisat. He loved loud parties, fast cars, and women who wore bright clothes and heavy perfume. He often made little jokes about Nafisat, calling her too plain or too quiet. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of teasing. But over time, the words started to sting. He would scroll through pictures of glamorous women on his phone right in front of her, comparing them to her in ways that made her feel small. "Why can't you dress like this?" he'd say. Or, "You don't really stand out in a crowd, do you?" Still, Nafisat loved him. She thought maybe, with time, he would see the value in her simplicity. She believed love meant patience and understanding. But deep down, she was beginning to feel like she wasn't enough. She tried not to cry, even when the hurt ran deep. Alone in her room, she would sit by the window, wondering why being herself wasn't enough for the man she loved. The dinner table was full. Cousins, uncles, aunties, laughter, and the smell of pepper soup in the air. Nafisat had spent the whole afternoon helping Kweku's mother in the kitchen. She had worn her favorite dress, a soft blue one with tiny white flowers. She didn't speak much during the meal, just smiled politely, passed plates, and made sure everyone had enough to eat. She wanted to make a good impression, as always. Then, out of nowhere, Kweku said it, loud and clear, with a smirk on his face. "She's not the type of woman I see myself with." At first, there was silence. Then came the laughter, awkward, cruel, and loud. One of his cousins even jokingly added, "You need someone with fire, not someone who blends into the wall." The words hit her like a slap. Nafisat sat there frozen, her hands shaking slightly in her lap. She didn't know whether to cry or run, so she did neither. She just smiled weakly and kept her head down, her food untouched. Kweku didn't look at her. He acted like he hadn't just shattered her in front of a room full of people. To him, it was just a joke. To her, it was a moment she'd never forget, a moment that would replay in her head for months to come. When the dinner ended, nobody walked her home, not even Kweku. She stood outside the gate for a few seconds, trying to catch her breath, before slowly walking away, alone. The night was quiet, the streetlights flickering softly. As she walked, she felt the tears come, hot and silent. But she didn't sob, she didn't scream, she just let them fall, one by one. Each step felt heavy, like she was dragging her heart behind her. She kept hearing his voice in her head. "Not the type of woman I see myself with." What type was she then? Too kind, too real, too simple. By the time she got home, her dress was wrinkled, her makeup ruined, and her heart completely raw. She sat on her bed, stared at the ceiling, and let the silence hold her. Something inside her had cracked, but it didn't break, because deep down, a small voice whispered, "This is not the end." That night, Nafisat didn't sleep much, but she made a quiet promise to herself. She wouldn't shrink anymore to make someone else comfortable. She might be simple, but she was not weak, and one day, the world would see it. The bus was crowded that morning, as usual. Nafisat had squeezed into a seat by the window, holding her small bag tightly on her lap. Her mind was far away, still replaying the night of the family dinner, still hearing Kweku's voice say those awful words. She felt invisible most days, like she was just passing through life, unnoticed and unimportant. As the bus bumped along the rough Aba roads, a woman sitting across from her kept glancing in her direction. Nafisat felt a little shy and looked away, but the woman leaned closer and smiled warmly. "My dear," she said, "you have the kind of face that should be on a magazine cover." Nafisat blinked, unsure if she heard right. "Me?" she asked softly. "Yes, you. You're beautiful, naturally beautiful. You don't even need makeup. You shine just like that." For a second, Nafisat didn't know what to say. No one had ever told her something like that, not even Kweku. Not even when things were good. Her heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Hope," she smiled back, her eyes a little misty. "Thank you," she whispered. But inside, that one sentence felt like a spark had lit a small fire. After the bus ride, Nafisat couldn't stop thinking about the stranger's words. "You shine just like that." It replayed in her mind all day while she swept her room, while she washed the dishes, even as she lay in bed that night. For once, she didn't hear Kweku's cruel words. She heard kindness. She heard belief. The next day, she stood in front of the small mirror in her room. No makeup, just her. She tied her scarf the way her mother used to, put on her favorite earrings, and picked up her phone. She took a photo, simple lighting, no filter, no posing. Just Nafisat being Nafisat. She stared at the picture for a long time. Then, with shaky hands, she clicked on a link she had found online weeks ago, but never had the courage to use. It was for a local modelling contest. The deadline was that night. Her heart raced. What if they laugh? What if they don't choose me? But something in her whispered louder this time. What if they do? She attached her photo, wrote her name, and hit send. She sat back, staring at the screen in disbelief. It was done. Nafisat didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she had taken a step just for herself, not to please anyone, not to be chosen, just to see what could happen if she believed in her own light. And all it took was a stranger's words on a noisy old bus. Words that didn't just compliment her looks, they reminded her of her worth. Port Harcourt was nothing like Abba. It was louder, faster, and full of people chasing dreams. Nafisat arrived with just one small bag, a little savings, and a heart full of quiet hope. She didn't know anyone in the city, no friends, no family, just a dream that had started with a single photo and a stranger's kind words. She found a tiny room to rent near a busy market street. It was small and hot, but it was hers. During the day, she worked in a local café serving tea, rice, and meat pies to customers who barely looked at her. Her feet ached from standing for hours, and her uniform smelled of fried oil, but she always smiled. She saved every little tip she got, even if it was just 10 naira. At night, when the streets got quiet, Nafisat would go to a small open space near her building and practice her walk. She had watched dozens of YouTube videos on modelling. She copied the way professional models moved, their confidence, their posture, their poise. She didn't have high heels yet, so she practiced barefoot or in her café shoes. Her neighbours sometimes laughed or stared from their balconies. One even asked, "You think you'll be the next Naomi Campbell?" She just smiled and kept walking. She sent photos and videos to agencies, local contests, and fashion shows. Most didn't reply. Some sent back short messages, "Not what we're looking for." One email even said, "Too traditional looking." That one hurt the most. For a moment, she almost started to believe maybe she wasn't meant for this. But then she would remember why she started, and that tiny fire inside her would flicker back to life. Slowly, Nafisat began to change, not into someone else, but into her real self. She stopped trying to look like the models on Instagram. She let her natural hair grow out and began wearing bold Ankara prints. She looked in the mirror and didn't see plain anymore. She saw strength, her dark skin, her wide eyes, her full lips. These weren't things to hide. They were her power. One day, a local photographer came into the cafe and noticed her. "You ever modelled before?" he asked. She smiled, heart racing, and simply said, "Not yet." He gave her his card. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to her. Rejection still came. The struggle didn't go away. But every day Nafisat walked a little taller, smiled a little brighter. She wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. She was becoming it. She had started from zero, yes, but piece by piece, step by step, she was building something real. And this time she was doing it on her own terms. The air in Accra buzzed with excitement. It was Fashion Week, music, lights, cameras flashing, and designers from all over Africa showing off their best work. Nafisat wasn't even supposed to be there. She had come with a small Port Harcourt team she'd been helping, just to assist backstage, steam clothes, and carry heels. She didn't mind. She just wanted to be close to the world she was trying so hard to enter. Hours passed in chaos, models rushing, makeup artists yelling, designers panicking. Then it happened. One of the lead models backed out. Something about a double booking. Panic spread like wildfire. The designer, a tall woman in gold glasses, looked around and shouted, "I need someone! Now!" Nafisat froze, her heart pounding. She wasn't even dressed. She wasn't even on the list. But before she could think, someone pointed at her and said, "What about her?" The designer gave her a sharp look. "You. can you walk? Nafisat nodded, though her legs felt like jelly. 10 minutes later, she was standing behind the curtain, dressed in a stunning Ankara outfit, vibrant oranges, deep blues, wrapped like royalty. Her hair was pulled back, her face glowing with nothing but a little powder and lip balm. Her hands trembled. The music started. The lights changed. Go, someone whispered. She stepped onto the runway, and everything else disappeared. Nafisat walked like she had done every night in the open lot behind her Port Harcourt apartment, head high, shoulders back, graceful, calm, powerful. But this time, she wasn't just walking for herself. She was walking for every girl who had ever been called too simple, for every rejection letter, for every night she had cried in silence. The room went quiet, not out of boredom, but awe. Phones came up, flashes went off, whispers spread. Who is she? When she reached the end of the runway, she paused, not for too long, just enough for the cameras to catch her calm, glowing expression. Then she turned and walked back, slow, steady, strong. Backstage, everyone stared. The designer didn't say much. She just looked at Nafisat and nodded once. That was enough. By the next morning, a video of her walk had gone viral on social media. People across Africa were sharing it with captions like "Pure Elegance," "The Walk of the Year," and "Africa's Hidden Gem." Nafisat sat in her little hotel room, holding her phone with shaking hands. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her photo was trending. Blogs were writing about her. Agencies were messaging. She didn't scream. She didn't jump up and down. She just sat quietly, eyes full of tears, a soft smile on her lips. For the first time, the world had seen her, and they didn't see plain. They saw power, grace, beauty. They saw Nafisat. A few weeks after Accra Fashion Week, Nafisat's life began to change in ways she never imagined. One morning, while she was brushing her hair and sipping tea, her phone lit up with a message that made her hands go numb. Vogue Africa wanted to feature her. She read the message 3 times to be sure it wasn't a scam, but it was real. The same girl who had once walked barefoot in a tiny backyard, practicing her catwalk in silence, was now being asked to pose for one of the biggest fashion magazines on the continent. Nafisat sat on her bed in shock, tears quietly rolling down her cheeks. The shoot was magical. They didn't try to change her. No heavy makeup, no wigs, no pressure to be louder or different. They dressed her in bold African prints, gold jewelry, and head wraps that made her feel like a queen. The photographer kept saying, "You are Africa's true essence." That phrase stuck with her. Africa's true essence. She didn't fully understand what it meant at first, but the more people saw her, the more they celebrated the very things she had once been told to hide. Her rich brown skin, her soft voice, her quiet strength. Soon, global brands started calling. Designers from Paris, New York, and Johannesburg wanted her to walk for them. But Nafisat had one rule. She would only work with people who respected her roots. She didn't want to be made into something she wasn't. She didn't want to bleach her skin, wear a fake accent, or be dressed in a way that made her feel like someone else. She stayed grounded. Even with all the fame, she still called her mother every week, still helped her old team from Port Harcourt, still said thank you to the makeup artists and photographers. People noticed that. They weren't just drawn to her beauty, they were drawn to her grace. At one show, a journalist asked her, "How do you stay so calm in all this chaos?" She smiled and said, "I've already survived rejection, heartbreak, and people laughing at me. The rest is easy." Her story began to inspire people far beyond the fashion world. Young girls across Africa were cutting out her photos and pinning them to their walls. Mothers were naming their babies after her. Schools invited her to speak. She didn't just become famous, she became a symbol. A reminder that true beauty doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand tall and stay true. Nafisat never forgot where she came from. She never became someone else. She didn't have to. Instead, she changed the world by being exactly who she was. Soft, strong, and proudly African. She didn't chase beauty standards. She redefined them. The billboard was impossible to miss. Right in the center of Lagos, bright lights, heavy traffic, and people rushing past with their phones in hand. But there, above it all, stood Nafisat. She wasn't just on the billboard. She owned it, dressed in a flowing Ankara gown, her head high, her eyes calm and fierce at the same time. Her skin glowed under the lights, and beside her photo were the words, "Africa's true essence, Nafisat for Vogue Africa." Kweku was in a taxi when he saw it. He looked up casually at first, then froze. His eyes widened. He leaned forward, pressing his hand against the window like he needed to be sure it was real. It was her, the same Nafisat he used to laugh at, the same girl he once said was too plain. Now her face looked down at the city like a queen. The driver noticed his silence and chuckled. "That's the new top model, Abby. She fine Shah." Kweku didn't answer. His heart felt strange. Not exactly regret, not exactly shock, more like a deep ache he couldn't name. He remembered that dinner table. He remembered her quiet face after his cruel words. He remembered the night she walked home alone. He pulled out his phone, opened her chat. The last message was from her, sent years ago. Something simple like, "Let me know when you get home safe." He never replied. Now he typed slowly, "I'm proud of you." He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. For some reason, he thought maybe, just maybe, she'd reply. A smile, a thank you, something. Far away, Nafisat was sitting in her hotel room. Soft music played in the background. She was doing nothing fancy, just peeling an orange, wearing her favorite wrapper, enjoying the quiet. Her phone buzzed. One new message. She saw his name. Her heart didn't race. She didn't feel anger or sadness or even surprise. She just looked at the message. "I'm proud of you." A long pause. Then without a second thought, she smiled, locked her phone, and deleted the message. No reply. She didn't need to explain. She didn't owe him anything. That version of her, the girl who once waited for him to see her worth, was gone. She had outgrown that space, that pain, that chapter. Kweku, wherever he was, would never truly understand who she had become. Not because she had changed into someone else, but because he had never bothered to see her in the first place. Now, the whole world saw her, but she had already moved on. Not out of bitterness, but from peace. Some messages don't need answers. Some goodbyes don't need words. The sun shone softly over Abba that morning, just like it had all those years ago when Nafisat used to walk these streets in silence. But today, something was different. This time, people knew her name. She stepped out of the black SUV with no makeup on, just a flowing Ankara gown, and her natural hair tied in a simple wrap. And yet, the crowd waiting at the community centre gasped, like royalty had arrived. "Nafisat!" someone shouted. In seconds, children were running toward her, women clapping, people holding up phones to take pictures. She smiled, hugged a few girls who had squeezed through the crowd, and waved at the elders sitting under the big mango tree. She was back home, not as the girl people once ignored, but as the woman the world couldn't stop talking about. The charity event was for young girls, free health kits, school books, and a talk on self-worth. Nafisat had partnered with a local women's group to make it happen, but honestly it was more than just charity, it was personal. She remembered what it felt like to grow up here, to be called too quiet, too plain, not enough. Now, those same kinds of girls were lining up, asking for selfies, clinging to her hand, telling her they wanted to be like her one day. One little girl, no more than 9, held onto her dress and said, "My classmates laugh at my hair, but my mummy said I look like you, so I don't cry anymore." Nafisat knelt down, held the girl's face gently and whispered, "They'll wish they looked like you one day." There were moments throughout the day that made her heart feel like it might burst. Women she'd known for years, neighbours, old classmates, even her former teacher, came to hug her, apologise, celebrate her. Some cried. One simply held her hand and said, "You made us all proud." She walked through her old street later, quietly, taking in every corner like it was sacred ground. The same roads she once walked alone after heartbreak now echoed with laughter and love. It felt full circle, not like a movie ending, but like a new beginning. Someone handed her a microphone on stage. The crowd went still. She looked out at the faces, some young, some old, some still learning to believe in themselves. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need to. "I came back not as someone better than you," she said gently, "but as proof that you were always enough." The crowd erupted in cheers, but she didn't cry. She smiled, because coming home wasn't about showing what she'd achieved. It was about reminding every girl here that beauty, strength and greatness can come from even the quietest corners, especially from Abba, especially from girls like her. The studio lights were bright, but Nafisat sat calmly in her seat, her legs crossed, her hands resting gently on her lap. She wore a soft yellow dress, her natural hair in a crown of curls, glowing without trying too hard. Across from her sat the famous TV host, known for asking hard questions, the kind that usually made celebrities squirm. But Nafisat wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Millions were watching. It was a live national interview. People from Lagos to London were tuned in. Social media was buzzing before the show even started. But Nafisat looked exactly like she always had. Peaceful, present, and powerful, without saying much. The host leaned forward, smiling. You've become one of the biggest names in fashion, from a small town to Vogue, from silence to stages. What changed you? There was a pause, a deep, thoughtful pause. Nafisat looked up, her eyes steady. Then she smiled softly and said, I didn't change. I just stopped letting others define me. The room went quiet. Even the host was caught off guard for a second. I spent years believing I wasn't enough, she continued, because someone said I was too quiet, too plain, too simple. But I realized those were never flaws. They were just parts of me I hadn't learned to love yet. The audience broke into applause. Cameras zoomed in on her face. That single line, I just stopped letting others define me, was all people needed to hear. Within minutes, Twitter and Instagram exploded. Screenshots of her interview were everywhere. Someone created a hashtag, #too simple to superstar, and it spread like wildfire. People began sharing their own stories. A girl in Uganda posted a photo of her natural hair with the hashtag. A boy in Ghana, who had been bullied for being soft-spoken, wrote about finding confidence again. Even celebrities began quoting her words. Nafisat sat there, unaware of how fast the internet was moving. She was just speaking her truth. Nothing fancy, nothing rehearsed, just honesty. The host asked, Do you have advice for anyone watching who feels like they don't fit in? Yes, she said without blinking. The world will always try to put you in a box. Too loud, too quiet, too dark, too simple. But don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Grow anyway, shine anyway. The crowd cheered again. As the interview ended, Nafisat stood and hugged the host. Cameras followed her as she walked off stage, and as she reached the back hallway, her phone buzzed again and again. Notifications, mentions, messages from girls around the world, all saying the same thing. Thank you. That night, Nafisat lay in bed, looking at the ceiling with a peaceful heart, not because of the fame, not even because of the applause, but because she finally understood what her voice could do. She had once been called too simple. Now, her simplicity had sparked a movement. The lights in Dakar shined brighter than ever that night. It was the final night of Fashion Week, and the room was filled with cameras, designers, models, and celebrities. But all eyes were on one woman, Nafisat. She walked up to the stage with calm elegance, dressed in a flowing white gown that shimmered under the spotlight. The host announced her name with pride. Model of the Year, a symbol of grace, strength, and authenticity, Nafisat. The applause was thunderous, but she stayed humble. She held the award in her hand, took a deep breath, and stepped up to the mic. For a moment, she looked out at the sea of faces, familiar and unfamiliar. Her eyes paused on one, Kweku. He sat quietly in the middle of the crowd, looking up at her. The same man who once laughed at her, who called her too simple to be someone. Now he sat still. No words, no smirk, just silence. Nafisat didn't flinch. She smiled gently, then turned her gaze back to the audience. If anyone ever calls you too simple, she said, her voice steady, smile. The crowd leaned in. Because simplicity, she continued, is power in disguise. The world might not see it at first, but when you know your worth, you don't need to shout. You just rise. The room exploded with applause. Some people stood, some wiped tears. Cameras flashed as the moment spread across the internet within minutes. But Nafisat didn't need the noise. She looked peaceful, holding her award close, not for fame, but for every girl who had ever felt invisible. And as for Kweku, he was just another face in the crowd now, no longer her future, just part of the story she had already outgrown.